Anderson had always thought he had the perfect marriage. His wife, Taylor, was everything he could ask for: loving, attentive, and supportive. They had built a life together filled with laughter, shared dreams, and mutual respect. Their relationship seemed unshakable, the kind others envied. But as time passed, Anderson began to feel a subtle shift. It started small, a missed call here, a distracted conversation there, but it was enough to make him uneasy. The harmony that once defined their life together began to crack, and Anderson could sense that something, though elusive, was slowly pulling them apart. The first sign of trouble came when Taylor began staying out late for work. At first, Anderson thought little of it. Long hours at the office, after all, were common in her field. But as the late nights piled up, she became more distant. She no longer sought deep conversations, and whenever he tried to connect, her responses were short or absent altogether. Her phone, once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always with her, the screen locked away from his prying eyes. She claimed to be working late, but Anderson couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. His mind raced with thoughts of what might be happening, and with every passing day, the doubt grew deeper. Anderson's unease slowly began to spiral into emotional turmoil. He noticed the small lies: "I'm just out with friends," or "I didn't get your message." The cracks in her story were subtle at first, but as they piled up, his suspicion turned into obsession. One name kept appearing in her texts: Mark. Anderson didn't recognize the name, but it was always followed by long, intimate exchanges. Taylor's behavior shifted even more. When she was home, she seemed distracted, her smile stiff and distant. The realization hit Anderson like a cold wave. His wife was hiding something. He couldn't stand the uncertainty any longer. He needed to know the truth. Anderson's suspicions led him down a dark path. Unable to confront her without proof, he made the decision to install a hidden camera in their living room. Each night, he waited for the footage, dreading what he might see. As days passed, his worst fears began to materialize. The camera captured Taylor leaving for late-night outings with Mark. Their laughter, the subtle touches, things that had once been reserved for Anderson. Strange texts flashed across the screen, and there were moments when Taylor didn't even try to hide her disinterest in him. With each video, the truth became undeniable. Anderson was torn. He wanted to confront her, but part of him feared the confrontation would destroy everything. But the evidence was clear. There was no denying it anymore. He had to face her. Anderson had a plan. He would confront her calmly without showing the emotional chaos bubbling inside him. He would be strong, unwavering. That night, Taylor came home later than usual, her energy unnaturally cheerful, almost too carefree. She greeted him with a smile that felt rehearsed, but Anderson said nothing. Inside, his anger simmered, but his outward calm was the only armor he had left. As she made her way to the couch, he clicked the remote, the TV screen flickering to life. The footage he had gathered began to play, showing Taylor and Mark laughing at a bar, stumbling into their home hours later. Anderson's pulse quickened as the moment he'd dreaded had finally arrived. Taylor walked in, a smile on her lips, unaware that her life was about to change. She reached for the remote to turn on the TV, and as the screen flickered to life, Anderson's eyes never left her face. The first few moments of the footage showed her laughing, carefree, enjoying Mark's company. The scene shifted to them entering the house, laughing, whispering, and stumbling slightly. Taylor's expression faltered. She glanced at Anderson, then back at the screen. As the images continued, her confident smile slowly melted into shock, disbelief, and then guilt. Anderson watched every flicker of emotion play across her face as the reality of what she had done sank in. There was no denying it now. His worst fears had been confirmed, and she knew it. Taylor's voice faltered as she tried to explain herself, but the words wouldn't come. Her hands trembled, and she fumbled with the fabric of her dress, avoiding his gaze. The guilt was written all over her face. Anderson remained eerily calm, his eyes cold as ice. Inside, his heart raced, but he wouldn't show it. He demanded answers, but the explanation she gave him was incoherent, full of excuses and half-truths. He wasn't listening anymore. He had already seen enough. Her betrayal was clear, and there was nothing she could say to undo the damage. With steady hands, Anderson reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the divorce papers. He slid them across the table to her, feeling the finality of the gesture settle over him. There was no going back. Taylor's face crumpled as she looked at the papers, the weight of her actions dawning on her. She pleaded, her voice shaking, asking for forgiveness, promising to change. But Anderson stood firm, his resolve unshakable. "Actions have consequences," he said, his voice low and unyielding. "This is the end of everything we've built." Taylor's eyes scanned the papers, and for the first time, she understood the gravity of her mistake. The life they had shared was gone, and nothing could bring it back. Anderson stood up, his movements deliberate and composed. Without another word, he walked toward the door. He couldn't let his emotions take over now. He had already made his decision. He left her standing there staring at the papers, her face a mixture of sorrow and disbelief. "Goodbye, Taylor," he said, his voice steady. Her sobs filled the room as he closed the door behind him. It was too late for apologies now, too late for anything. The divorce process went through without much complication. Taylor attempted to reach out to Anderson multiple times, but he remained resolute, ignoring her calls and messages. She moved on with Mark, but the relationship quickly fell apart. Anderson reflected on the decision in quiet moments, realizing he had done the right thing. There was no place for betrayal in his life. Though the pain lingered, a sense of peace began to settle over him. He had chosen himself, and for the first time in a long while, he felt free.